Well, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started here. My name is Alina Irwin, and I am the faculty director of the Sustainability Institute here at Ohio State. I'm also a professor in the Department of Agricultural, Environmental, and Development Economics. I am so pleased to welcome you all here today as we gather to celebrate women in sustainability and to learn from each other. This is the 5th annual Women in Sustainability Gathering, led by an Ohio State student and guided by Sustainability Institute staff here at Ohio State. Over 6 years ago, a past student was in discussion with our staff about a great opportunity she had at a conference to learn about all the challenges and opportunities specific to being a woman in the field of sustainability. From there, this event was created to open a space for dialogue and sharing by women and on and around our campus, as well as women who are in sustainability professional fields. The opportunity for our students to ask questions and hear from potential mentors and engage in purposeful dialogue is truly invaluable. And we are so thankful to all the professionals joining us here today and engaging with our students in the breakout rooms that will happen later on in this program. We are also so grateful for the women we featured as panelists over the past few years, from work in community development and urban agriculture to sustainable and equitable transportation to policy and conservation work. These women are super talented and inspirational professionals who are paving the path for future sustainability leaders. Now, I'd like to begin this year's program by introducing an Ohio State graduate student and the panel moderator for today's event, Maggie Borders. Maggie graduated in December of 2019 with a BS in environmental science and a BA in German. Since coming to Ohio State, Maggie has been involved with sustainability initiatives through the Sustains Learning Community, the Zero Waste Initiative at Ohio State Stadium, and the Sustainable and Resilient Economy Discovery Themes program, which later became part of the Sustainability Institute here at Ohio State. Maggie is currently a graduate student in the School of Environment and Natural Resources, studying soil science, and is very passionate about communicating the importance of soil survival to global sustainability. She is equally passionate about being an educator and chose to be a part of this event to help show other students that there are many pathways to a successful career in sustainability and to highlight the incredible women working towards a more sustainable future. Maggie, thank you so much for moderating today and for all that you do.
Thank you very much, Dr. Irwin, for the kind introduction. And thank you to the Sustainability Institute for your support and guidance in making this event a reality. So howdy, everyone. And again, welcome to the 5th annual Women in Sustainability event. As the student lead for this program, I'm really excited and grateful that you all could join us today and take part in this important dialogue on women in the sustainability field. So before we get going, I have a few housekeeping items to go over. The format for this event is 40 minutes of panel discussion, followed by 30 minutes of breakout room small group discussions. For the panel discussion, please ensure you are muted on Zoom. We will remind you to unmute for the breakout room discussion, but we ask that everyone remain on mute during the panel discussion to prevent interruptions. We generated a list of questions to ask the panelists, but we will have some time at the end to take a few questions from the Q&A. Gina Jockey, the Director of Education and Learning for the Sustainability Institute, will manage the Q&A. Please make sure to use the Q&A to direct questions to any or all of our panelists. The chat will remain open for general comments, but questions put into the chat will not be answered. So make sure you use the Q&A instead. I will recap the information you need about the breakout rooms before we move to that section of the program. One last reminder, please mute yourself. So I would like to begin with an introduction of our esteemed panelists. Our first panelist, Mary Mertz, is the Director of the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. Our second panelist, Tess Mateo, is a UN Special Advisor on Gender and the Environment and is an impact investor. And our third and final panelist is Dominique Hadad, who is the founder and CEO of GreenScope Consulting. So we are all so thankful that you guys could be here today. So panelists, please introduce yourselves. So Mary, would you like to start?
Sure. Yes, my name is Mary Mertz, and I'm the director of the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. And I've been in this job for just over 4 years. I was appointed in 2019. And just a little bit on my background. So my background is not really in environmental science, right? So I have a bachelor's degree in political science, a master's degree in international relations, a law degree. I've practiced in private practice. I was first assistant attorney general for some years, and I've had some other federal and state and government jobs. And for some period of time, I did have the opportunity to work with Ohio EPA and the Ohio Department of Natural Resources under Governor Voinovich. And I think it was that experience that I'd finally gotten far enough along in my career. Sometimes jobs just happen to you, right? You look for what you want, but sometimes they just happen. And I'd finally gotten to a point in my career, working hard at all my previous jobs, where I could actually make a selection. What do I want to do? Where can I make a difference after all these years? And then I had the opportunity to lead the Department of Natural Resources. My interaction with them decades ago, I couldn't forget, and I wanted to re-engage with that. And so, working with all of the different entities that interact with the Department of Natural Resources. And it's been a pleasure and a joy, and I look forward to doing it for a few more years. Thanks, Maggie.
Thank you so much, Mary. So Tess, would you like to go next?
Sure. So I wear several hats, and I'm so excited to be part of this group because it's always, to me, a big thing is to get more women in the sustainability side, but specifically when it pertains to entrepreneurship and making money. So my background is as an undergraduate, or when I was in college many years ago, I wanted to actually be a neurosurgeon. But then I dropped the curling on my right before the MCATs, and that didn't work out. But since I was an entrepreneur, my initial, and I'm giving you this background because to tell you how I evolved into sustainability. So I was an entrepreneur, and then I started several companies, but I actually ended up working in corporate restructuring work, working for the largest multinational companies in the world. And I worked in the C-suite. And when I worked on a project called Vision 2050, and that was because our largest client, I was with PwC at the time, our largest client, Unilever, asked us to join the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. I co-chaired this project called Vision 2050, which changed my life and several others. There is where I learned how to do well by doing good. And one of the things in the messages I hope to share with everyone here is that most of the, in the big wave of technology, 99% of the wealth created from the internet transition to the automobile transition, any of these big technology transitions has always gone to males. We have a huge opportunity with respect to sustainability because women invented sustainability. It was invented by Gro Brundtland, who was the first prime minister, female prime minister in Scandinavia, brought this project. We are the ones who pushed corporates and governments around the world to be caring about the planet and people. And so, but we never make money from it. And so I am so excited that Dominique is part of this panel. She was one, and because if I can, one message I want is how can people do well by doing good, specifically around sustainability? So I'll share more of my background later in the discussions, and thank you again for having me.
Thank you so much, Tess. And you've already introduced our last panelist, Dominique. So Dominique, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, thank you, Tess. So yeah, I'm Dominique, and if you can't tell, Tess is one of my many mentors. I'm very appreciative of Tess. So yeah, I'm Dominique. I'm the founder of GreenScope Consulting, and GreenScope got started actually as an Ohio State President's Prize award-winning project, and is now a running company, and it's great. So GreenScope's essential mission is to offer sustainability consulting to organizations that either don't have it or have a gap. So we help organizations become zero waste. So I essentially serve as a consultant for schools, food businesses, corporations, anyone you can imagine that wants to reach their sustainability goals, but needs someone kind of doing that groundwork. And for me, kind of like why that is a good question. So I am really passionate about the intersection of business, engineering, and sustainability. And quite frankly, I graduated 2 years ago. I was right in the heart of COVID, which was just an added fun layer to that. But I couldn't find the role that I wanted to see and wanted to like be working in and the impact I wanted to create. And I was very lucky that I got to instead build it. So that's what I've been doing. And my background with my school and previous experience was in engineering. So I was industrial systems engineering, major from Ohio State. I took some sustainability courses during my time, but never got any kind of formal sustainability element to my degree. And instead, I added sustainability through my extracurriculars. So I got involved as like the director of sustainability within student government. I also was one of the co-leads that put on this wonderful Time for Change Week. So it's really cool to see this event continue and to be part of it. And I can even see my past kind of leads in previous years on this call, which is really, really cool that we're all still here. So yeah, and then I got an internship throughout my time at Ohio State. I interned as an energy engineer in supply chain operations consulting. And those that kind of all fed me with different skill sets that I wanted to tailor towards sustainability. So then I got to win that President's Prize, start my company, and now I get to work in sustainability and connect those dots with those skills that I built. So that's what I bring to the table today.
Thank you so much. We are so grateful to have all of you here because you're all very different women working in different areas of sustainability. And moreover, you're different people with a huge variety of experiences behind you. So we're going to get with that right into our first question. So given all of your unique personal and professional identities, what are some sustainability issues that you see that others may not consider, and how would you like to see those issues addressed? So Tess, I'm going to start with you for that question, but I'm really looking forward to hearing from all three of you.
So one of the things that's a great guiding principle that people aren't familiar with is called the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And the reason I bring everyone's attention to that is that it was the first time in the history of mankind that all 196 countries and 90% of the Fortune 1000 companies all agreed on what's the world's biggest problems. And when you look at that list of 17 SDGs, you can find where exactly find the issue that you want to focus on. So my focus is on clean energy, sustainable food, clean water, sustainable food chains. And when you look at what the critical path is to a sustainable 2050, you can easily carve out how you address or how you apply your talents to that sector. So I invest in companies addressing clean energy. I invest in companies around sustainable food. And one of the things that Maggie and I discussed was soil health is on the critical path to sustainable 2050. And my investments in space economy companies address soil health. So that's kind of one of the things that I would suggest that when people want to say, well, what issue or what part of sustainability do you want to focus on? If you focus on any of these big problems that will be around for at least 50 years, you've got a significant, career path that you can carve out of those issues.
Great. So Mary, would you like to chime in with your opinion on that question?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. And I think especially because, I haven't formally been in this field for the last many decades, right? So for me, it's connecting people with what sustainability is. And I know that sounds so simple, but it's so human. Whatever it is we do for a job or we do in our personal time, we think everybody else knows about it. Everybody knows about, German dancing, or everybody knows about this big lawsuit I'm working on because it's in the news, but we read the news selectively. We read for what we're interested in. And today, news is so self-selected. And so I think in this area, we assume people know stuff that they just don't know. And if they don't know it, they're not going to care about it. They're not going to do anything about it. And just one little example, and I don't know if you consider this part of the sustainability field or not, but, Ohio is full of beautiful nature preserves, and they are established to protect the most fragile ecosystems, the most fragile plants, the most fragile animals, that's what they're for. And there was really a feeling that no one should touch these places, as much as not even put up a sign to say what they are. And what happened was the division that took care of this disappeared because nobody cared about it. Nobody knew what it was. And so now, kind of breaking convention, and I'm insisting we have to have information out there so when people visit, they know why it's important, they understand it, they appreciate it. Even though we don't want to mess up the 10 square feet around the sign, we have to do that or they're going to go away. So I think it's just, we assume everybody knows what this stuff is and they really don't. And so making that connection was, I guess, what I think is absolutely critical to keep moving in the area.
Yeah, absolutely. So that element of just communicating that these things exist to make sure that people are aware that they're worth protecting. Dominique, what about you? What do you have to say to that question?
Yeah, I think that's a really good answer. And definitely I've seen that already, just doing a lot of like the groundwork, just a lot of education. I think people are never tired of us re-explaining some of the same things. And that's always, I think, really interesting. But I think the two kind of key topics that I personally get really excited and kind of jazzed about with sustainability, I think are really interesting because they both happen in your kitchen. So like one happens in your refrigerator and one happens in your trash can. And I think just like that dichotomy of like food waste and food insecurity, I find really interesting. I think that's a space that I've chosen to dive into early on in my career because of that. But kind of one is the solution to the other. And I think that's really interesting. And both are a burden on our communities and are a big sustainability problem. Food tops the list on the UN list of concerns when it comes to sustainability. And I think just being more aware of the fact that we all take part in both those things every single day. So when you're thinking about ways to learn and kind of like re-educate or share with others what you know, I think those are really two cool ways to get started because they're very physical. They're in your space. They're in your habits every single day. We're all eating and we're all throwing something away every single day.
Yeah, thank you. I was really hoping that I would be able to almost synthesize your answers into a greater comment, but I'm so glad that I can't because you all are so different and you have such different perspectives. And that was great. And I wish we could talk more about all of those things. Still, though, I have lots of questions to ask all of you, so I want to get through them. So question number 2, despite years of work in the US alone, the gender pay gap still exists. The Equal Rights Amendment has not been ratified, and women's rights are still in question. Do you think gender inequality is a threat to sustainability? To what extent? And can sustainability be achieved despite social inequalities? So Mary, I want to start with you on this question.
Yeah, and it's a really thought-provoking question. So I guess I'd like to separate my answer into two areas, one in the United States and one in the rest of the world. So clearly inequalities exist, right? They do. But the opportunity is there for them not to exist, right? So where I work, where I show up every day, there are a lot of strong women that are making a difference in this. So it's hard for me to see, and across the state, I see so many strong women working in this area, and so I feel like there's the opportunity. Might not be a simple opportunity, might require more action that should be required to contribute to these solutions. But there is that opportunity, and it's only going to get better as time goes by, as long as we're intentional about it, as long as we are intentional. And so I look at that differently than, some of the rest of the world where the inequalities are more stark. And, how can we possibly solve a solution with only half of society working at it, right? So in those parts of the world where women don't even have the opportunity, even though it's an uphill battle, and you got to do a lot of things you shouldn't do. So when you look at some of those areas, I wonder how could they ever reach it if there are women there who don't have either the education to learn about what they need to do or the opportunity to do what they need to do. And so that concerns me more than here in the US. I guess you know, there's always opportunity for women to be outspoken and bold. And I think we will achieve what we need to achieve. I mean, still, I agree when you look at numbers, even in agencies I've worked in, I've pulled numbers later and said, look, let's look at the women versus the men in the pay scale, in the leadership scales. We tend to win in the leadership scales and not on the pay scale. And I'm constantly trying to fix that, but there is that opportunity. So obviously sustainability is a worldwide problem though. So if we can't address it in those countries where it is, the inequities are more stark, that is a concern for the future. I don't have any solutions to offer, but that's kind of how I break it down in my head, and how can we provide leadership in that area.
I think that's a really great perspective, especially to break it down between our culture and our national infrastructure and then what's going on in the rest of the world. Obviously, we can't solve problems all over the world very easily, but like you said, this is a global issue and it's an issue affecting women everywhere. And Dominique, I'm really curious to hear what you have to say about that as well.
Yeah, I think if I'm allowed to stray a little bit from the question, I think, and I don't even think I'm not sure if I'm going to get to a question or to a point of view, but I think this question started to get me to think about the fact that I think the solution to a lot of our tough problems overall, but also our sustainability problems, we're going to need diverse people in the room to get a diverse set of innovative ideas and creative thinking and points of view. And I think also it's important to mention that sustainability truly affects underprivileged populations over anybody else. When you have the privilege to run from the effects that sustainability, mishandled is going to cause, then you're going to be able to protect yourself, and those communities that are at risk often don't get a seat at the table in discussing what problems we tackle first. And so I think my instinct is to even think more broadly of like underprivileged populations and underrepresented groups as opposed to just women. I think there's a lot of impact there, and we are better off when we let more people in the room to solve problems, which includes women, but I think also includes people who are going to see those effects and their communities are at stake, as opposed to, again, like looking at our country and especially this group here on the call.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point to make. And that kind of brings us to Tess. You have so much international experience, and you have experience in an area where men and racial majorities tend to benefit the most in money-making enterprise and entrepreneurship. And so I'm so interested to hear what you have to say.
So it's interesting. I was right before this call, I had a 2-hour call with the G20 for G20 preparatory meetings. And the G20 is the 20 largest economies in the world. And this is when the heads of states are going to be meeting in September to agree of which gender equality has been and continues to be part of their priorities. So I just kind of want to back up a little bit that if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, and I'm always going to give you like frameworks that you guys can access, because then you can leverage it. Because you could, if you wanted to make sustainability specifically around gender your passion, then you can basically Google SDG 5, Fortune 5,000 companies, and you can find every company and every country and what they're doing on that, and find your place. But the reason I'm going to talk about why sustainability is critical to gender equality is critical to sustainability is right now in the United States, and I'll give you the US and I'll compare it to the world, is in the US, our gender pay, women get paid 80% of what men do. And so you could Google all the studies, McKinsey's got them, Deloitte, PwC, everyone else. Globally, we're closer to 40%, that on average, the average woman around the world makes 40% what a man makes. With respect to participation in the workforce, globally, it's under 30%, even though in the United States, we're around 60%. And that's, so if you look at why, and the reason why I'm so passionate about this is that gender equality, as both Dominique and Mary mentioned, is that without 50% of the world population participating, you're never going to get to the best solutions. The other thing about but I'm going to flip that on the other side, is that though it sounds awful, the best thing is it's never been the best time to be a female, to be a minority, because everybody knows that to get to solve these big global problems, we're going to need to have diverse people in the room. And that's why, quite honestly, if you wanted to, let's say, go into the high sector growth jobs, which is all around the technologies, around the space economy, and you are the only female in the room, all of a sudden your voice is going to be heard because people want that, right? So it is an amazing time to be a female, an amazing time to pursue where you will enter as a minority, but because you are a minority, your voice is actually amplified. As long as you've kind of participated of how you add value to the conversations. And yes, my background is in corporate restructuring work. And it was when I was on top, as one of the top, working for a top firm and working in the global CEO's office, this woman from the World Bank says, "What are you doing for women?" I said, "What? Your whole career, you're like, you want to beat out anybody. You don't care who's on the other side. You just want to be number one." And then she goes, "You need to do something. You're in a position where you can bring all these other women up." And all of a sudden, she taught me how to leverage my position to create the ecosystems and the infrastructure and the ladders, because I saw the map of how to make money. I saw the map of how to get to the top. And if I can just translate that and give it so that more people can climb those ladders, follow the maps to this, then that's what I found was as my role.
That was such a beautiful synthesis of kind of Mary's answer and Dominique's answer and your own unique answer. So we have these ideas of bringing in women and minority voices, and especially here in the US, having those opportunities. They are possible now, but obviously it's still something that we haven't achieved, full equality. So we're still working towards that. And you've kind of also given me a really good segue into my next question, because those inequalities still exist. Women and young professionals often struggle with having their ideas be heard in the workplace. So I want to ask all of you, have you ever had trouble with feeling heard in your career? If so, how did you deal with this? And if not, why do you think that is? And finally, what advice would you give someone to help them make sure that their voice is heard? So Dominique, as our resident young professional, I would love to start with you.
Yeah, first I will say this is a big question, and it's a really good question. I think my first reaction, especially coming out of that, what Tess just shared, I think we can all agree that it really depends on the room that you're in. So you can find yourself in a space where you feel valued and you feel like the key added opinion to the conversation, and there's rooms where you feel like you're not there at all. And I just want to mention that because I think that it's important to acknowledge that both happen, and I think I personally attribute that to the people in the space and what they choose to value in a conversation or in decision making. But I wanted to jump through just a couple anecdotes when thinking about this question, because I think I come at this from a variety of different spaces as an entrepreneur and an engineer. So for one, as an engineering student, I interned at the company where I was an energy engineer and I was the only woman in the office. When I was in my interview, they were like, "Do we have a women's room?" So just for context, I've been in spaces like that. And frankly, I had to decide, my way of handling that was deciding that wasn't a space for me to grow. I had my experience, I was there for many months, but I didn't return for that core reason. I actually ended up sending some male friends of mine that are engineers to go work for them because their company was so cool, but it wasn't a space for me to grow and flourish. And I think another kind of comparison to that is more my day-to-day now. So one of my key team members is a male. He comes along with me to a lot of my meetings. And we have noticed that when clients kick off the conversation, share a lot about, Tess is already laughing, when the clients kick off the conversation are telling us about the problems they're having and why they wanted to meet with us or X, Y, and Z, usually they are looking directly at him for the entire duration of that conversation, up until they give us a moment to speak. And then usually I'm the one who, jumps in with, "Here's how we can help you." And my team member looks at me and kind of gives me that respect. And then kind of the room shifts a little bit. And I want to mention that I tackle that by having an unspoken rule on my team of how we behave and how we talk, how we respect each other. We have good communication of what those moments have made me feel like, or have how to handle them. And that's personally my approach in moments like that, is just leaning on communication, having the right team members around me to support me and figuring out how we can solve problems together, because you can't necessarily predict who you're going to be coming across. And kind of my last piece I wanted to share was that at one point I was putting my venture through an application process, and the first few rounds were written. So I was coming in on a piece of paper, I was getting judged, sent feedback, and that was it. And then round 3 or 4 was when the application round became more of a pitch style. So for the very first time, I was coming into the space to pitch my idea with my face. And so I was a part of this program that also had the judges were required to record their feedback at the end, and they were required to disclose their biases. And I mentioned that because the very first piece of feedback I watched on a video after my pitch was one of the judges saying that she was absolutely surprised when I came on the screen and I was a girl. She was very convinced I was a boy. She explained that it was because my applied idea was very analytical, it was data-driven, it was an engineered solution, and she talked about that. She said, I was sure this was going to be a boy. Also, my name is Dominique, and in some communities, that can make you think that I'm a boy. And so I think those just things were stacking up against me. So, but I think it's interesting and left me kind of feeling almost complimented at first, where I was like, why do I feel complimented that this person mistook me as a boy? But I think also moments like that have just left me with kind of like this one thought to lean on, which is that I think a lot of mentors have reminded me that women statistically do not put themselves in a lot of spaces. They don't apply for things that are, maybe out of their reach, or just add their name to as many applications or lists as men statistically do. So I think I actively encourage myself to speak up and put my name out there, and you cannot control who is on the other end of that, unfortunately. I'd be curious if my panelists have any thoughts on that side of things, but yeah, I wanted to mention just a few of those kind of ways that I think gender has impacted me in my career in different ways, and some have gone differently than others.
That's really interesting. I feel like you hit on 3 big points. One is recognizing where you're probably not going to grow, like you said. So recognizing what opportunities are healthy for you and where you see yourself being. The second is that creating spaces where you can be seen and heard, and other people on your team feel like that as well. And then the third is remembering that there are these biases that exist just towards men in certain realms and with certain ideas. So Mary, I'm curious, as a woman who's leading an organization, what do you have to say to this question?
Yeah, so I'd like to answer it in a couple of ways. First, sort of my own development, and I had some advice from when I was on a board once. It's like, don't take forever to find your voice. We want you to participate now, and to remember that, and not be afraid to make mistakes when you talk. You don't want to be foolish. You don't want to have not done your homework. You don't want to look bad, but don't be afraid to speak up. And if everybody else says what you were going to say anyway, find a way to engage in any event. And this is a little bit different than what you're asking here, but I think it's related. My advice to people has been, take every public speaking opportunity you can, whether you want to or not. You can only get better. So very early in my career, I had a couple of just colossal fails, right? I have these friends who their best friend is a microphone. They pick it up and they hold the audience in the palm of their hand, and they just extemporaneate, and they're fantastic. And I thought I could do that. Nope. So I had some big fails, and I had this period of time where I had every excuse in the book not to engage in public speaking. I had to wash my hair. I had to take my dog for a walk. I mean, it didn't matter what it was. I was not going to do it again. And finally, I'm like, I've got to get over this. I have to prepare. There were many years where I would practice my speeches in front of my kids. They really love that. Not at all. But you got to find some way. You've got to just take every opportunity and prepare and do it. And the more you do it, the more you get used to it. And the more you get used to that in a public forum, then when you are in problem solving meetings and project meetings, you will be more likely to be confident in your voice. So it's take every chance you get, volunteer, be the one, put yourself out there, be willing to fail. I did several times, big ones, but learned from that, and you go on to do that well. I'm going to take a second to answer it as a boss. And when I'm sitting in a room and I have a team and we have an issue or a problem, or we are trying to resolve something, just to give you my perspective, right? So I've invited everyone in that room because I think they have something to contribute. If you don't contribute repeatedly, you're probably not going to be back in the room. So think about that. I invited you because you've got something of value to add, or someone invited you because you've got something to add, and do it. And it is an art, and you find your way into that conversation and approach it like an art. Do not wait to be recognized and handed the magic, scepter or whatever it is that gives you the right to speak. You gotta problem solve for yourself. You got to figure out how to get in that conversation, and you got to figure out what it is that you have to add to that. Because if you don't repeatedly, I don't need you there. And that's not what we want to tell all these women on this call. There's a reason for you to be there. And it and engaging the piece that I has. So I guess that's how I'd answer that.
I think that was a great answer. I think it tied in really nicely with what Dominique was saying about how women tend not to put themselves out there as much as men. And I really like that you brought in that leader experience of saying, if you're not participating, then I don't have reason to invite you back, basically. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there, to engage, because that's what keeps you present. So Tess, I'm so curious, given all of your experiences and the many hats you wear and the many people you talk to, what you have to say.
So I've had the greatest male mentors, and I will say male sponsors as well. And it's really important that when you find your mentor group, it has to be a completely diverse mentor group. And the reason I was able to get on top of the corporate restructuring work was because, one, the best advice I ever got was follow the money. Who in the room owns the budget? Who in the room can influence where resources get moved? And when you figure out how to make that person, like, you make them a rock star, whatever you, either as a client, as a boss, or whatever. But when you understand who has the power in the room, and you make them even more powerful or better, or you minimize the risk because you highlight something that you saw you didn't, all of a sudden you become a valuable member of the most powerful person in that room's team. And when you do that, then things change, and very differently, because then you are then taken under the wing of someone very powerful. And that power is actually, you go in that shadow, and you actually end up getting all the exact same powers that person has. So that's one of the tips that I got from a male, which actually helped me tremendously, because then I was never afraid to be different. Because, and Dominique's, you're early in your career. I'm so thankful that I got this advice very, very early. And so I'm hoping that all of you will understand and share all that information. Another thing is that, when we talk about public speaking, and I love Mary's point, like, oh my God, how many times did I fail tremendously? And it was amazing, because until I worked for the global CEO PwC, and we had 156,000 employees in 165 countries. And being, where I was his body double, so he covered North America, I do South, he go Europe, I go Asia, and we ping pong around the world doing that for 10 years. But what was super interesting is that these guys have all these amazing tips. One is, when you write a speech, it is 120 words per minute. Women miraculously fail because nobody ever gave us that tip. And so we write and we practice based on a time clock. And so we could never adjust or edit our scripts. And then all of a sudden we never get our point across because we got too emotional about something. So that's really, really good. Use that data point, 120 words per minute. So anytime you prepare anything, if you had a 5-minute slot, make it a 3-minute slot, and using 360 words. And then the last point I wanted to say is, one, do not be afraid to be different in the room, because then people remember you. Now, remember, I had my challenge was I was female, I was brown, And I was also at least 15 years younger than 90% of my clients. So I entered those rooms, Dominique, I was laughing because everyone always assumed that the guy in the room, whoever I brought in, 2 levels below me, the analyst or whatever, was always the head. And then it always made me chuckle. And what happens so is you become a secret weapon of whoever wants to bring you in. So my boss used to, Sam DiPiazza, who was the global CEO of PwC and then became vice chairman of Citibank and all these other jobs. But I was always his secret weapon because people assumed I was just somebody that was there as an assistant. But in reality, I was the one who was going to be restructuring everything. And so people would talk about things that they shouldn't talk in front of me, but all of a sudden I knew, oh my God, this division's got a private jet, whack. This division's got this much, and all these different things that they were spending. Oh, I have at a golf gala, I had this dinner, this client's complaining that whack, 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 whack. So, use that as your secret weapon. And lastly is, and I forgot to mention this earlier, is use your power. Women, we have the biggest transfer of wealth in the United States from the dying baby boomer men to their wives and to their families. You guys, you are extremely valuable as the consumers, the people who decide how household wealth is spent. Use your wallet. I spend 20%. I mean, I wish I could spend 60% on my spend on women-owned businesses or companies who support women entrepreneurs. I invest my money more than 50% in women or companies of women. I spend my time on companies. So I always, I spoke when I was in Davos, and I've been going for 15 years or so. I remember I had, speaking in front of all these high-level women. And I said, who here has a Louis Vuitton bag? Everyone raised their hand. Oh yeah, you guys just handed off all your wealth to a man. Like you guys should be and when I asked people, you could be buying products, you could see which are women-owned businesses, they're labeled. So you have Ecos as a household brand. You have, instead of buying from any of the Giorgio Armani brands or any of those or Prada, go after Tory Burch. It's a woman-owned company and they support women entrepreneurs. So it's really, really important that you just don't talk about it. You have to support women in the room, but also those trying to do the right thing.
Thank you. All three of you had such unique answers and I loved all of them. Tess, that was so interesting, that piece of advice from the male mentor about the 120 words per minute. That's going to burn into my brain. So thank you very much.
Follow the money is more important than the 120 words per minute.
Yes.
Follow the money. It is so important because women don't tend to do that. So what happens is everything out there has actually been created by women, but we haven't monetized it, right?
Yeah.
So we need to, we don't have real power until at least 30% of the world's resources are under a woman's name and less than 10% is today.
Thank you so much. That is also valuable to remember. And thank you for contributing that. So we do have a few audience questions. Let me look here really fast. So this one I think is really interesting. For the panel, what advice do you have for women working in the sustainability field where their management does not have or has lost passion for sustainability? So does anybody want to volunteer to take that question? Tess, go ahead.
I'll use that first advice I gave, follow the money. If your company, figure out how the company really makes money and apply that, whether it's, if the biggest customer for the company is focused on, environmental issues, how can your company respond and help that client become more environmentally focused or so forth. So always follow where are the big customers doing of your company, or follow what the senior management has committed to their shareholders if it's a publicly listed company.
Thank you very much. Does anybody, Mary or Dominique, do you have anything to say?
I think I would say find a way to help them look good with a success. If you're talking about your boss or your leader, they need to see something tangible come out of this, right? You lose passion when you're not seeing progress, when it's not tangible, when you are not succeeding in doing it. So find some way, and this is kind of back to my connect to the people, that people understand what it is, simplify whatever it is, just some small piece of it, and make them successful. Somehow put them out there with an event or a statement or something where they're going to get some recognition and people understand you're doing something good, And then they'll get a rush of excitement from, oh, this is really cool. I'm really succeeding here. Okay, what else are we doing? What else are we doing? You know, help me build it up more. So find some little piece of it where you can make them look successful.
I think that goes back to what Tess was saying in a previous question about finding that most powerful person in the room and getting on their team. So I think that reflects the same idea. Dominique, what do you have to say to that question?
I think one ad I was just thinking of is potentially if, you know, other side of the coin, if maybe you're not in a team that is just thinking there wouldn't be like a great win, but if on the other hand, maybe your management is not on board because they simply don't understand, going back to Mary's original thought that I think a lot of the education sometimes is still necessary around the topic of sustainability. So I think my advice there would be, if you're seeing something your management is not seeing as an opportunity, I think also starting to figure out how to get the work done or find some way to deliver and demonstrate where you see the opportunity. So like, for example, it reminds me of when I was in internship where I was on a material management team. So like very supply chain and operations focused for they're a manufacturer for like home goods, like think washers, dryers, refrigerators, you get it. So I was in charge of managing like all the material in the 14 different manufacturing plants. And I found an extra data list of material that was disposable versus returnable. And I was like, what are we doing with this? So I made an extra little dashboard for my manager and started telling the story of how returnables could reduce their waste in their manufacturing if they just leveraged the data they already had to tell the story. And she had no idea to think about it that way. She had never talked to the sustainability team at the corporation. And so I think finding maybe opportunities with the viewpoint you have, whether it's as an intern or as an early employee or anything, I think you have access to information and ideas and ways to look at things that maybe even your manager doesn't realize those connections are there. And you can start not only getting those like successes, but even just start figuring out what that story looks like.
So Dominique, what you did though was you found money, right? So you found money. And that's why I'm trying to make sure that everybody understands her value was that she found a cost savings for her boss. And what Mary was saying is absolutely right. If you always make your boss, wherever you sit in an organization, look great, and then, you know, you will always be part of, people will recruit you because like, oh my God, every time you have this person on your team, they make you look good. That's exactly your job. And then more opportunities open up. And when you volunteer and join groups at companies or organizations, or even your research, if you make others look good, they will always want to bring you along because everybody always wants a wingman or wingwoman.
Yeah, so I think, Dominique, what you were saying also ties back into what Mary was saying earlier about finding that unique way you can contribute in a room. So I think that's a really valuable lesson for us to remember. Between that and following the money, these are really great pieces of advice. And to that end, we're in a sort of a bit of an awkward time space. We don't have a lot of time, enough time for another great discussion. So I'm going to move to our rapid fire questions. And I know that Tess has a book that she's really excited to share with everybody. So I'm going to ask, what's your favorite sustainability podcast or book right now? And Tess, I'm sure you've got it on deck. So tell us what it is.
Can you see that? This is Investing in the Era of Climate Change by Bruce Usher. And the reason it was voted Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Fortune, McKinsey, you could actually Google and you'll see little podcast slide decks or whatever. And the reason why is, you know, and I hate to always force the money thing on you guys, but women don't think enough about money. But Richard Branson said famously 15 years ago, climate change is this generation's greatest wealth creation vehicle. And I am urging all of you, because if all the men make all the money again, they will have all the power into the next 20 years. And we are in an amazing transition time right now. Everything was busted during COVID. So everything is being rebuilt and we have all these exponential technologies. That's what we have to do. Thank you.
Who would like to go next?
I'll jump in. So I think the last book I read, and I don't know if it's considered in the sustainability space, but Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Kimmerer is really a story of the indigenous connection in America to plants and the earth. And it's just a different way of looking at conservation and sustainability, you know, through the eyes. Off the top of my head, I cannot remember the Indian tribe that she was a member of, but it's something we don't see that much here in Ohio because we don't have any federally recognized tribes here. But over the last couple of years, I've done a lot of work with tribes that were in Ohio that are now in Oklahoma. And so to kind of increase my understanding of where they're coming from in this, I just really enjoyed the book. It's maybe more a personal look at sustainability and our gratefulness for the earth and why we need to keep it beautiful.
I think that's really valuable, those like narrative stories and those personal stories, because they really drive people to actually change their behavior and see things in a different way. Dominique, do you have any podcast or book recommendations?
I think my most recent sustainability read was a book called Fashionopolis, which was actually recommended to me by someone over at Swaco. But that book is, for me, I think I always look at just trying to find an aspect of sustainability I don't understand, or I don't fully understand like the breadth of the problem. And I like diving into spaces that I've, haven't investigated. So I think for me, the world of fashion is a huge part of the waste story. And I don't fully understand how a lot of those supply chains work. So for me, it was really interesting to learn about kind of a really close, frankly upsetting look into the world of fashion, and that a problem that's only increasing and getting a bit more scary for communities, people that are involved, as well as the actual physical waste that's created. There are a lot of really great startups also in Columbus that are working to solve this problem right here in our community too. So I wanted to be well versed, but it's a really great book. But I will warn you that it is minorly upsetting.
Well, thank you. And now that I have this platform, I'm going to share my book recommendation as a soil scientist. My book rec for anybody interested in, actually anybody who is interested in sustainability at all, is called Dirt, the Erosion of Civilizations. And it's about how poor soil husbandry literally leads to collapse, like on Easter Island, just as one small case study. So now that I have plugged my own opinion, thank you so much for everyone who shared questions in the chat, and so sorry that we could not get to all of them. We only had such a short time with our panelists, and they're obviously brilliant women with really interesting opinions on all things sustainability. So thank you to our wonderful panelists again for sharing your experiences. It has been a privilege to hear from you, and we thank you for your time. So we're now going to switch to our breakout room portion of the event. Mary unfortunately cannot attend the breakout room, so we will say goodbye to Mary with this. Thank you so much for attending. Do you have any farewell words?
No, I wish everyone luck, and don't be afraid to speak out and advocate for yourself, because people all around you are doing it. So why not you?
Thank you. That is a great point. So with that, I'm going to draw your attention to an event that we have coming up. This is the Environmental Professionals Network event. They're hosting their annual Earth Day event on the evening of Wednesday, April 19th. This event will be featuring the work of Black artists and will discuss the connections between art, agriculture, and the environment. So join them for another exciting discussion addressing the issues of equity within sustainability spaces. So we're talking about women in sustainability today. Their event is going to be so interesting, talking about art, ag, and the environment, like I just said, and equity. So I think that's really worth attending. And the link to this event has been shared in the chat. So we're now transitioning into the breakout room portion of the event. Once in the breakout rooms, you'll have the opportunity to network with other students and professionals, and we will be using Jamboard to aid our verbal conversation. So we'll be posting a link to the Jamboards in the chat, and you can use these to track your discussions and keep track of key points. The first page of the Jamboard, there's, well, 3 pages total, but really the first 2 are the most valuable. The first page of the Jamboard is to aid in networking. So you can post your company's information, your information if you're a student. You can indicate whether you're hiring or just looking to network, whatever else. So the second page of the Jamboard is to track key takeaways from our breakout rooms, or you can also, post questions on them if you're too shy to answer them in the discussion yourself. So please use the sticky note function you'll see on the slide here. where it says how to add a sticky note. It's honestly very simple. If you follow the link, it shouldn't be too hard to work through how to use it. So in follow-up for this event, we'll be sending out a PDF of all the Jamboards as well as the recording of this program. The breakout rooms will close promptly at 1:30, and we will have a brief sign-off to mark the end of our event. So the breakout rooms are now open. Please select one to join. If you have any technical difficulties, stick around and we'll help you enter the room of your choice. I'll be in one, Tess will be in one, and Dominique will be in another. So please join whichever one piques your interest. Everybody is back in the main room now that the breakout rooms have closed. Thank you all so much again for attending this event. This is a wonderful annual event put on by the Sustainability Institute. So I would encourage all of you to attend year after year. But this marks the conclusion of our event. Thank you again to the Sustainability Institute for your generous support for the event. A special thank you to Dr. Alina Irwin, Gina Jockey, and Matt Griffin for their help and support in planning this event. Finally, thank you again to our panelists and attendees for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today for the 2023 Women in Sustainability event. We hope to see you again next year. So thank you all very, very much.